Welcome, beloveds. Thank you so much for joining Nurture the Soul. I am your host today, the Reverend Ellie Hutchison, and I am the Minister for Church and Community Engagement with the Faith Info team. And we are a part of the Love of Church at the national setting of the United Church of Christ. Nurture the Soul is a weekly webinar series that seeks to share practical and educational, innovative and formational resources to engage the critical topics of our time and to be a resource for our local churches and faith practitioners. We are always searching for ways to produce opportunities to engage you, the beloved community, in order to focus on the care and the education for the people of God. From cultural and community organizing to congregational leadership, from worship and theology to resourcing small and rural churches, and from youth and ministry and children programs to a wide range of justice issues. We invite and feature guest artists, authors, thought leaders, and key leaders in our communities. Nurture the Soul stays current with how the gospel is alive in our world at this time. And we hope that this space serves as a space for connection, for community, and for nurture. We believe that together we can bring our church, our community, and the world towards something that God imagines for all of us. So we invite you every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our Nurture the Soul. And from time to time, look for special offerings. You can find a full list of what we have upcoming and our previous shows at www.ucc.org/events, and as always, all of our social media platforms. And friends, if what you hear today moves you and enhances your ministry or your soul, I hope that you would consider donating to the United Church of Christ Annual Fund. And you can do this by texting UCC to the number 41444. It is your prayerful and financial support that helps programs like this to help uplift the voices of those who are doing great work in our world to be shared with you. And so we thank you. We thank you for joining us, and we thank you for supporting us. And now this is our final, I'm heartbroken, but this is our final series of a 5-part series that we have been hosting with a fellowship that my predecessor, Reverend Tracy Howe, in 2002 started. She started this fellowship with the goal to build capacity in our local churches, with a goal towards community and cultural organizing, and to help cultivate the faith formation in our everyday lives of disciple and worship. She realized that she couldn't do this alone, and so she developed this fellowship program to intensively train a handful of leaders and to nurture the support necessary for sustained engagement in our complex and urgent issues facing our world today. And through the leadership of these fellows, further programming and educational opportunities have become available in their local settings. The Congregational and Community Engagement Fellowship Program was designed to reach out to authorized ministers and lay leaders with the desire to grow in the arts of community and cultural organizing, to collaborate with the national setting, and to increase the capacity of local churches to organize across those issues that impact their community in which they geographically reside. This 2-year fellowship was immersive and concluded with 5 outstanding participants that you have heard from over the last 4 weeks, and in our final week today. And for this final episode, it is my honor to introduce someone who, when she calls upon me, I am following her lead. This final episode highlights the thought, labor, the care work, and the collaboration cultivated by amazing humans. And we're focusing on the Southern Conference and Patrice Smallwood, who's going to help us understand a little more about how historically Black churches in the South bridge the work of faith and justice, and why it is necessary for the church to continue to do this foundational work of creating communities of care these communities of care that build relationships, and how we can all connect the church to the people through our lived experiences. And Patrice Smallwood, joining us today, was born and raised in Norfolk, Virginia, and has dedicated her time and gifts to several ministries and organizations within her local church, her conference, and her community. She is the youth pastor at New Macedonia and is also on the board of Rural Family Development through the Virginia Council of Churches, and has served as a project director for the Kairos Freedom Schools of Virginia. Amen. And as board member of the Virginia Organizing and a UCC Congregational and Community Engagement Fellow, she is committed to social justice and racial equity, engaging congregations in the work of faith-based organizing for change and embodied discipleship. She joyfully co-chairs the African American Women in Ministry National Steering Committee and is secretary of Deborah Women's in Ministry Incorporated of Greater Hampton Roads. She holds an associate degree in information technology and networking, a bachelor's in Christian ministry, and a master of divinity from Regent University. She is currently employed as an IT site manager, where she gets to enjoy the opportunity to coach and mentor this new generation of technology innovators. And Patrice, like, we have so much to talk about just beyond this webinar today, because girl, I can go down that information technology hole with you. But I do want to hear, and I think that our participants and those of you who are joining us virtually live right now, or will be watching us at a later time, thank you. Thank you for being here. And Patrice, can you share a little bit more with us in detail about your own ministry and your local organizing work in Virginia?
Absolutely. And thank you, Ellie, for that wonderful introduction. It's good to be with you. Good to be with you today. So, I am a community organizer, by heart. I've been deeply engaged and committed to this work since really about late 2019, right before COVID. And I'm committed, I really am, to this justice work. It has been a part of my vantage point, my life experiences, my interactions with people. I view it through the world. I view the world through the lens, of this justice work that I do. And so I believe that God is just. I believe that God has called us to do justice. And so I believe that Jesus is justice. And a large amount of the work that I do in the Southern Conference and in the Virginia area is local community organizing. And so I currently serve as a board member and a chapter member of Virginia Organizing. And so I'll share a little bit about Virginia Organizing and what its work is. It's a grassroots organization statewide, and it's dedicated to really challenging the injustices that a lot of our communities and our people are facing. But the key about Virginia Organizing is that we are not present to be advocates or to speak on behalf of the community. Our goal is to empower the community to use their voice. Oftentimes they don't get the chance to do so. So we pass the mic to them. We're nonviolent, we're nonpartisan, and we really are a group that focus on, again, identifying issues in local communities. We have 14 chapters across Virginia. I'm connected to the Norfolk chapter. And the reason I'm connected to the Norfolk chapter is because that's where I was born and raised, and that's where I worship, and that's where I am connected to, right? And so when you say, why Norfolk, it's because my roots run deep in Norfolk. Norfolk is also, like I said, the place where I worship at New Macedonia Christian UCC. And Norfolk is a city that is historically known for redlining, for gentrification. It's a city that is historically known for the communities that have been impoverished, especially our Black and Brown communities. And so the local campaigning that we do in that area, in that city, and in some of the regional spaces around or connected to us, involves, since I've been connected to them, removing school resource officers, right, in schools after in the aftermath of the George Floyd protests, working on getting libraries and rec centers reopened after COVID when other localities were opening, but our localities were still, cities and our impoverished communities were still closing, working on disability rights, working on transportation issues, working on getting better infrastructure for a lot of our areas around, and really just doing, even now, working on some local city council actions toward affordable housing in the city, especially around high rent prices and renter accountability. So that has been a large amount of work. There's not one particular thing that we focus on. It all depends on the needs of the community. And as you, I'm sure, are aware, the needs of the community can be great and it can be very vast. And so we do the work to really talk to the people, to get on the ground, to speak to people in the community and find out what they need and what resources they need. And we do that work to try to help, not just find resources and change those structures, but also, connect with others who are also doing that same work. And so that's a lot of my local campaigning. Right now, we are in the process of doing some work on doing mindfulness in schools, in some of our local schools. And, this work that is done in the school is really not, and I pause for a second because it's not a work that we started. We actually began a lot of this work in our Portsmouth public schools. And so I have to share a little bit about the geography of where I am, in Norfolk, or what we call Hampton Roads, or the Tidewater area. There are 7 cities that are very, very closely connected: Norfolk, Portsmouth, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Hampton, Newport News, and Suffolk. And so you can have one foot in one city and one foot in another. And so we are very, very closely connected. And what that means is that we're supporting one another. And so generally the issues that one of those cities are having, then it's also an issue that another city may be dealing with. And so we're able to share resources, and we're also able to support one another. And so the work that we're preparing to engage in with mindfulness in schools, although it happens in Norfolk, we're pulling from a model that was used in Portsmouth to get this work also done. And so that's a lot of the work that I am engaged in on the local level. And many people think, well, local community organizing, we're standing at the street and in front of city council with our signs and protesting, but it's so much more than that. Rarely are we doing protesting. We're doing more behind the computer, emailing our local officials. We're doing door-to-door canvassing, knocking on doors and doing tabling at various events, walking around with flyers, finding out from people, hey, do you feel safe in your neighborhood? What can we do to help your community be a thriving community? And so that's kind of the work. We're doing lobby visits, making sure that people are equipped and educated when it comes, especially now where we're in a time of elections, to understand what's happening with a lot of our newly elected officials, or those who are on the ballot, so that they are aware, they have time. And we set up, forums and symposiums and various spaces, or even virtual visits, where the community and the constituents and those who are in those districts can have conversations with their officials. And so, the local work is what brings me joy. It is what fulfills me. But I also, with Virginia Organizing, am a member of the governing board. And so in that role, I'm able to have more of a bird's eye view and kind of set some of the legislative priorities for not just the local chapter that I'm in, but for all of the local chapters throughout the state. And so in that role, we just completed our power analysis, where we come together and we think about, hey, what is happening across the state, that although it may have a different specific need in each one of the local cities, it's something that we can actually start working up from a statewide perspective. And so clearly housing is one of those big issues, and restoration of rights has been a huge issue, like I said, in the face of the elections that are coming up. And so that's kind of the work that I do from the board level, from the state wide level. And, we come together, we strategize to really kind of set that light and that guidepost for a lot of the local chapters that are involved in this work. And so that's where my heart is. It is truly in the organizing field. And that's kind of what I have been engaged in here in my neck of the woods.
Well, I appreciate that, Patrice. And there's like 10,000 things I want to talk to you about. But I want to reflect a little bit on what I heard. I think that will lead into another question. This idea of, so you named the caring for oneself, you named the housing crisis, you named voting, you named carceral systems. And so you go across these sectors, right? And what I love is this idea about how you've built relationships, and we can talk about that a little bit more, this idea of relationship building and trust gathering and those kind of things. But you had to have seeds somewhere. So you've talked a little bit about where you've planted. You've talked a little bit about the partnerships that you have been able to continue to cultivate and foster. But I know in previous conversations, we've talked a bit about the work of the Southern Conference and the need for this justice coalition. And so I hope that you can share a little bit more about how this came about. And I know that there's this term that y'all have used is you want to get an organizer in every pew. And I love that. But I also know that there are some that don't love that, right? And so can you talk a little bit about the fruition of this?
Absolutely. Yes. And I have to say that throughout the webinar, you may hear me say my work or I do this particular work or the work I do. But I'm glad you bring that up because I do not do this work alone. And certainly there has been some nurturing that has taken place. And that, of course, has come from many of those in the Southern Conference that have really guided me into understanding how important this work really is. And so amazing group of people, not only in Virginia organizing, but also, again, in the Southern Conference. And to your question, yes, they have nurtured, they have mentored me. And I have to really first, celebrate my mentor, my mother, Reverend Dr. Yvonne Delt, because she has, been at the helm of this social justice work for many, many years. And so, those conversations that we have had for many years and watching her and hearing about her and just looking at all of the things that she's done throughout the years truly has been just something, one of the things that has allowed me to continue going. It has been a root and a foundation for me. And the other piece about that is, I have to highlight our conference minister and our associate conference minister. Reverend Dr. John Myers is our associate conference minister and our conference justice minister. And so Reverend Myers, Dr. Myers was really the one who took the vision from our conference minister and put it into action with the Justice Coalition. And in the Southern Conference, our conference minister, Dr. Ed Davis, named our conference a few years ago a anti-racist conference. And one of the things that he shared when we did that was that this is not just a conference that is anti-racist by name, but there's intentionality behind this, and there's work that is to be done, behind that. And so this is not just something that we put on our T-shirts or that you now add to your bulletins or we put on our banners when we have our gatherings, but it's work and it's intentional work that we do. And so with regard to, that Justice Coalition, we had many leaders, organizers like myself who have just had passion for this work, who love this work, who are committed to this work in their own areas throughout Virginia, the Eastern Virginia area, and then Western and Eastern North Carolina, that have come together from all of our three associations to form the Justice Coalition. And a part of that work and really the mission has been to ensure that our churches and our communities are doing the work of racial equity, and that we're educated, we're equipped, and we're empowered in these pieces. And so A part of the work that we start out to do was come together. And again, thank God for Dr. Myers, who put this project plan together to really begin by educating the congregations and the churches. And so we created a mandatory training, a racial equity training that Reverend Sakina Hamlin was leading and in combination with in conjunction with some other folks. And so we were able to do this training that was mandatory, that allowed the churches to come together and what we call have those courageous conversations, and to kind of set the tone for the work that we wanted to do, to really get them thinking about what we need to do and how each individual church in its in its context and its culture and its locality can begin doing this work of social justice and social change and racial equity. And so all of that work that we have done, beginning with the training that we held to really introduce who we were, introduce what we were trying to do, and then get the churches engaged and get them thinking and talking about this work. We also had churches that participated and even some of our leaders, clergy and laity, that participate in an 8-week Just Faith curriculum, which really is a curriculum that allows the church to kind of go through a more intense study, right, of really recognizing what are the biases, right? What are the areas that we need to really tackle and focus on? And so a lot of our churches were able to, or members and congregation members were able to go through that. And we also even in our coalition had opportunities where our churches participated in a dismantling racism workshop. And, we had a church that was predominantly Black and a church that was predominantly white come together. And so you can imagine the conversation and imagine, really how insightful, but, the work that was able to be done and taken away from that time and that space together. So we have really been actively and still working to engage the churches through this coalition and through, much of the work that we're doing. Recently, in the aftermath of we had a mass shooting that was at a Walmart in Chesapeake, Virginia, back in 2022. And Dr. Myers, even a part of this work, has really been very active in doing forums that has engaged many community partners, other faith-based organizations, faith-based, partners and community leaders that have come together to really talk about this issue with gun violence and gun control. And not only to talk about it, but to really understand and get our young people engaged, to get people in the community engaged, to get our churches engaged, to really talk about, okay, how do we strategize around this? And so it began with, talking to the clergy and holding these forums, and then opening it up to others throughout the community who also have this same vision, this shared vision. And so it's really a way to, again, strategize around change and also build power, because it's not just about UCC's role, but it's about everybody that's impacted by what's happening in the community, to not only, again, bring awareness to gun violence, but to ultimately the goal is to end this gun violence in our communities. And so that's, a lot of the work that we have done and that we are still working towards. I have been right now in the midst of this work that we're trying to do, working on a proposal that I have been working with my associate conference minister on, and really even getting more engaged with working with the local churches to do some of this faith-based organizing actions, and really working towards direct action, because that's what that coalition was all about. It was not just educating, but it was really empowering the churches to move towards direct action in their churches. And so one of the things that I have been working on is this proposal that I am going to be presenting, and hopefully being able to model in maybe one or two churches where we can get that church engaged in the issues that's happening in their community, because the church is sitting in the community. It's a part of the community. And so do that by doing that with listening sessions and having people from the community come into the church or come into a public space where the church is able to lead them through, hearing what they are going through, hearing some of the concerns and the problems within that neighborhood, and then actively being able to come together with those in the community, not speaking on behalf of or working on behalf of, but sitting at the table with those who are directly affected and coming together with a plan to say, okay, what can we do? Who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to send letters to? Do we need to, have, a rally or a press conference outside of city council, but then working towards that direct action to make that change. And so, I have to, really just say that with this model, the goal is that other churches, you start with one or two, and that other churches will see the work and see how, it's not only working to build a community, but it's working to build a church, because a church, a community that is cared for equals a church that is cared for, and they both come together. And so that is, other churches will begin to see this model and say, okay, well, we can also do this in our community as well. And one of the things that I often think about with this proposal that I've been working on even now is how to engage our young people, because I'm a youth pastor, and my passion is not only this justice work, but it's also our young people. And our young people are looking for ways to be more active, especially when it comes to the church. And I think this is just a perfect way to kind of bridge the intergenerational gap. If we, have our young people that are present at these listening sessions or at these forums or symposiums, and they're hearing the issues that are happening in the very community in which they are probably going to school in or living in, because we often think that our young people are not aware, they're not impacted, but they are. They're just impacted, and they have a different perspective on what's happening because they experience it differently. But to be able to have them at the table and sitting and listening will even, motivate and spark their interest in wanting to get involved with that church and get involved with that work. And so it bridges the gap and gets everybody, the church, the young people, the community, the partners, those who have invested interest in that community, gets everybody involved in working towards change on a particular issue, a particular topic. And so, that's kind of the work that we are focused on in the Southern Conference. Certainly not where we want to be, but we are moving in such a great way when it comes to this organizing and justice and racial equity work.
Yeah, definitely. And I love this idea of like the listening sessions, right? And like the invitation even have hopefully the other generations listen to these young folks, right? Because like I started this this webinar was saying, if you call me Patrice, I'm going to follow you, right? Where if the young folks are going to call, I'm going to follow. I think there is just so much young greatness that is happening, right? And I like to credit my generation. I'm just teasing about that, but when you talk about children, when you talk about the different churches, right? So we all come at things with different theologies and ideologies and all of that kind of stuff, and we're becoming more siloed, right? So we're being pushed to think and to remember what is happening now, but in a different way, in a siloed, individualistic way, which is that individualism has always been a part of our American thread to a certain degree. But I would venture to say even currently we're being pushed to forget. And in that pushing to forget or not learning, we do this in way to return to another way of living, right? And when you talk about building community, you talk about building resiliency, when you talk about coalition work and what it takes for this particular nation to come together to do the work that our scriptures call us to do. For me, I feel like you have to learn about the history of the Black church. the history of the Black church's role in justice and organizing work. And so I would like us in this moment of being pushed to forget, to kind of take a break and share a little bit about this, about, you know, for those of us who may already know it or need to hear it in a different way, for those who may not even know, can you talk a little bit about the history of the Black church and how it is this, you were looking, yes, you were looking to the disciples, you're looking to the prophets and all of that stuff, but you're also looking at your ancestral tree,
That's right.
right?
That's
Right. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to take a step back with the young people because it's so important when we talk about not forgetting two pieces. One, when it comes to our young people, when we think about these listening sessions and engaging them and involving them in this work, we have to realize that a lot of young people that I've spoken to say they are not present. And that's the question I hear all the time. Where are the young people? They're not present because they don't feel they matter. And so it's important to engage them in a lot of this work where there is direct action and even engaging them in their creative voices to see how we can strategize for change. The other piece is in those sessions where we talk about these things, the history has to be spoken, and our young people have to know our history, right? The scripture says, tell them the story, tell them of how you got over that. These things should be shared from generation to generation. And so when we talk about the history of the Black church, it is imperative that we continue to remember and that we continue to speak it because our young people need to know where we've come from so that they can continue to carry this torch. It may not be me that gets to see a lot of this change in my local community, but God knows I hope that my nephews and the other young people that I am ministering to and I'm mentoring and I'm empowering and talking to, it is my hope that they will be able to take these things and maybe they will see it in their lifetime or their children's children in their lifetime. And so, to answer your question, when we talk about the history of the Black church, I think it's critical to this thought of churches being, and I want to introduce this now, communities of care, because, let me just say, I speak on the experience of the Black church because I'm rooted in the Black church. I'm a part of the Southern Conference, which has over 50 churches that are part of the Afro-Christian Convention. And I encourage those who have not, and I know that it's been shared, but those who have not to read and to be educated on the fifth stream of the UCC, the Afro-Christian Convention, to purchase the book and to really read about our history even more so in that space and in that literature. But when we talk about the history, the Black church has been rooted in coming together to help those in the community, right? That's been in our blood and in our nature. It was, the church that engaged in the work to ensure that everybody in the community was thriving and that they had the resources that they need. And, we have a clear example of this when I talk about the Afro-Christian church. One of the biggest examples that I often think about is that of Franklinton Center at Bricks, which is a part of, a staple in the Southern Conference. And I think about the work of so many, Reverend George Dunn and so many others who came together and saw, wait, in the time of segregation in our schools, that we need a place for our Black children to be educated, right? And so instead of just sitting back and complaining about the fact that we don't have a place for, our children to be educated, hey, look, let's do the work. Let's organize. Let's come together. Let's build, power and build partnerships and get this space together. And from that, we have, the Franklinton Center, which is now called Franklinton Center at Bricks. And this is not the only space. I think about even in my own city in Norfolk, we have the history of the Norfolk 17, where one of our historical churches in Norfolk was used as the space to educate those young children, 17 Norfolk residents in the area that were not allowed to be in school. And so that became a place where they were able to come in the basement of that church and be educated. And this has happened, throughout our churches and throughout our community. This has been a part of our culture. And so, like I said, for years, when we look at historically, the Black community and the Black churches have come together to kind of bridge that gap and do that intersectional work, right? Some may have been faith-based and some not, but they came together to do that work. And when I go back even further, like you say, to our ancestors, the role of the Black church was critical and essential in the civil rights movement, in voting rights, right? Joining with Dr. Martin Luther King and John Lewis and all of those that came together. I mean, our churches were essential. They were the places where forums were held. They were the places for leadership and to really bring people together to fight for these issues and to give them hope about what could be. And so I think about it, and I've been looking at a lot Henry Louis Gates and the work that he has done. He has a book that was published called The Black Church. This is our story, this is our song. And there was even a part of that, a documentary that was aired on PBS talking about the role of the Black church. And one of the things that, he kind of talked about and shared was how, the Black church was like the parent of the civil rights movement. There was so many organizing efforts that were done that really kind of centered around and included and stemmed from the work and the presence of the Black church, the education that came during the time of segregation. Like I said, the meetings and forums with activists and leaders that were held to be able to speak to our people, to empower our people. And so the Black church really was that catalyst for social justice and racial equity during that movement. And our pastors were the leaders in that fight for change. And so, early on, when we think about it, it was such an essential and important part, even, in the time of slavery, where we saw, Nat Turner and that rebellion, that happened. These were, pastors that were doing this work. So, the church empowered people. They helped them to grab a hold of their faith in a living God that, although God did not bring them to this space, and God was not, the reason for them being in the place of oppression, God was surely able to bring them out of it. And so in that church, in the Black church, not only was it a place to really come together to organize and to fight against the oppression and all the things that the racism that was happening in that time, segregation, the Jim Crow era, it was also a time again to give hope to a people that I'm sure at times felt hopeless. It was a space where they were able to connect the divine to this now on the ground work, right? And so they were able to merge again those two pieces. And to forget that history, to forget the work and the role that we've played in this justice work for so many years, to forget that, it's disheartening, and it can't happen. And so in order to be a community of care and to create communities of care in our church, especially in the Black church, where we see in our Black communities, there are so many who are impoverished, so many who are oppressed, so many who are underprivileged and underserved, that it is so imperative that the church then join with those in the community to fight for some of the rights that we are often robbed of. And so, I think about James Weldon Johnson in our African American national anthem, where he says in that one line that says, "Keep us forever in the path." And then he goes on to say, "Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee." And that just speaks to this intersectionality and this partnership, that the work of justice and the work of the church, that this is where God has met us in this place of doing this justice work. God was with us, and God has been really sort of the catalyst and the strength and the foundation and at the heart of what the strength that we needed, really the power that we needed to continue doing this work in the face of such adversity. So, the charge and the call and the work that many of us have been doing throughout this series, but the work that I especially is doing here in the Southern Conference and representing the Black church, is one that my hope is that churches will continue to keep on that path toward justice, and keep on that path of engaging the church in this necessary and, like I say, critical work.
Yeah, yes, yes, yes. Preach. I feel like preach, y'all. This is the 5th week where I'm like, I have just been to church. This has been fantastic. And I was hoping you were going to break out in a song, but I'll get you on the other way around.
Okay.
Tom and Tom put something into chat, and that reminded me to let y'all know there is a Q&A feature for sure. Please, please, please go ahead and use it. We'll have an opportunity after my final question with Patrice here. And it is kind of building on what Tom shared into chat. There's a number of ways that, we can know the individual definitions of words being used, right? And we can understand from a philosophical or a theological or an ideological spot of what these terms mean. But you have mentioned relationships. You've mentioned truth building, you've mentioned listening, you've mentioned communities of care. And so I wonder if you can elaborate on what it means to have the communities of care together in our current sensibility, building off of that of the Black church tradition, building off of kind of that, right, is what Tom had put into chat, is that anti or perhaps the individual white Christian model or white patriarchal model. Can you elaborate on what it means today for communities of care? And then how do you maybe invite others to build that within their, whether it be geographic, or whether it be their church, whether it be their family, right? Yeah, help us out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about the question, why the church, when we talk about creating these communities of care. And I shared before, the church sits in the community, right? And I just think it's so important that when we consider the church's role, that it cannot be simply coming on Sunday or weekday, one day during the week, taking up the parking spots in the community, waving at the neighbors to say, hey, God bless you, come on over to our service this morning. And then we leave and we have no part, right? We have no part or no dealings with that community. And until we are doing some type of community event that we want to come together and do, it has to be sort of intentional, not sort of, but it has to be intentional, and it has to be continuous. And so, I think when we talk about the communities of care, I wanted to take a minute to really go through and share some of the things that I feel would be so critical, just a few pieces that I have noted during my course of doing this work, not only in the church, but also in the community from the local organizing standpoint. And so I have a one pager that I want to share, and it'll show up. But really, this is, speaking to really the fact that the people have the power. And that's why we want to engage the people in the community, because the church in that community is a staple. It has power. The people who are directly affected have power. And when the two come together, they can certainly impact change and see change happening. And so there's a couple, like I say, a few pieces that I wanted to share, and what I believe will really answer that question and to help churches really see how they can become a community of care in their local area. We talked about relationship, but the first part about it is to really get into reflection, right? Before we even go outside, to really look on the inside and to kind of reflect and do a self-reflection on what we're willing to do. Because I think a lot of times the church is very divided, even in of itself, on how much it's willing to go, how far it's willing to go. And so I certainly think that the church should start off with spending time in prayer and having conversation and reflection around, questions of how is the local church, our local church, now invested in the community long term, right? Because we're not just looking to have spots and areas of um, community outreach programming, but we want to be a part of the thriving, successful growth and prosperity of this community long term. And so, how is the church invested in the community long term? And then also the question to really ask and reflect and to pray about is, what is the church's desire for the community? Because when I have a desire that I want to see my community grow, I don't just want to come and park my car and have service and then leave. I want the community where I worship to be a thriving community, to be a successful community, to have all of the resources that it needs. And so if I desire that and I want that, then I'm going to work towards that. And I can then spend time to figure out and have conversation and reflection about what that looks like. And so I often think about, the scripture in Colossians 1, the latter part, 15-20, it talks about how Christ and God is in all and through all and for all. And so often in the church, we have been a part of every aspect of life, not just the spiritual life, right? We are a part of the financial growth and prosperity and work. We're a part of, work life. We are involved in the school and education piece. We're involved in so many various aspects in their relationship aspects and marriage and all those things. But the one piece that we don't involve ourselves in is that quote unquote political, right, or justice piece that people are facing. And so to nullify one but highlight the other really doesn't do any justice, and it really doesn't help, again, like I keep saying, for a thriving community, and it kind of denies the function of both when you don't include all. So the first piece about that really is to spend time in prayer and conversation around some of those questions. And the other piece about that, the second part about it, is to really know and understand the demographics and the issues that are faced in your community. If I'm in my church, one of the things that we often do, a part of Virginia organizing and a part of the local churches, we walk through the community and we knock on doors and we just introduce ourselves to say, hey, how are you doing? We're down the street. What is it that you need in your community to feel safe? How can we be a resource to you? Is there anything that, you wish that this community had that you don't see? And so it just gives an opportunity. It may not even be any questions. It may just be getting to understand if the community is full of more elderly, or if it's more young people, or what's happening in that community. And so to really get a chance to know and understand the demographics is helpful. And I say this because if a church decides that they want to open up a food pantry, it really won't be that effective for the community that it resides in if food insecurities is not an issue. If the issue happens to be finding places for their children after school, or if the issue happens to be, extremely high rent prices in the area, or maybe, whatever it may be, there's an issue with transportation. And so getting to know and understand the issues that are being faced by the community in which the church resides in will really help the church be a more of a resource and connect more with that community. And so the third piece that I really want to share is building relationships, right? And I say it is building relationships over building memberships, right? Authentic relationships. We're not just looking to bring members in the pew, but let's just build relationships with some people. Build the relationships and they will come. They will come when they see that you care about the community. They will come to the church, and that spend time that considers or takes, includes, and involves time, active listening, asking questions, and really connecting with the people. And when we talk about building relationships, it's not just building relationships with the people in the community, but with the businesses in the community, with other nonprofit organizations that have a shared vision in that community, and talking with those civic leads and city councils, making sure that there is a presence in those spaces. The next piece is to really listen, right? Listen to those who are directly affected, because storytelling is powerful. I talked a little bit about listening session, and I'll throw something in the chat that I believe will be helpful. It is a listening session, a listening project that was done here in one of our localities in Virginia. But I believe the information, the model, and the strategies that they use would be so very helpful. And so it really just taps into, when you talk about listening sessions, it's not a gripe session, but it taps into what we in the Black church have done many times, and that's testimony service. One thing we do, we know how to give a testimony about what God has done, but a part of that talks about where we were, right? This is where I was. I once was lost, but now I'm found. And so it speaks with where I came from, and then where I know God is bringing me to, or where God has taken me. And so the listening session kind of merges that to be able to have people come to really share the issues that are happening in the community, to couple that or to counter that, yes, with prayer, and yes, with the strength of God, but also with direct action. And the final piece is watch your language. I cannot tell you, and someone, I think it was Tom that put in the chat and says that love Jesus equals justice. And he said instead of social justice, they use Jesus justice. And I love that, because that is this final piece when we talk about how do we create communities of care. It is, you got to watch the language that you use, especially in the church, because, you know, many churches don't want to be too political, don't want to be too engaged in this, you know, the work with politics and all of these other pieces. And so that means that we got to shift how we talk, right? And how we engage people. And so that made me, right? Instead of saying social justice, we say Jesus justice. Thank you, Tom. And instead of talking about campaigns, building campaigns or starting campaigns, we use the term movement. And, you know, instead of, we talk about, or instead of organizing, we use those terms of embodied discipleship, of Christian service, of mutual service, because this truly is the work that Christ has called us to do. And so when we watch our language, when we, again, not wanting to be too political or partisan or what have you, we can engage the churches and the members, and even our pastors. We can engage them more when we put it in the different language. And so those are the pieces that I wanted to share, really, in how we create communities of care.
Yeah, that is super important. And Tom, I see your question. I want to get to it. Carolyn has a question in the Q&A that I think, Patrice, you can answer probably offline. Type your answer onto that. But I want to get to Michelle's question, kind of building off of that energy that you just shared with us, Patrice, is, and I have lots of ideas, and this is not an easy question, right, that Michelle asked, but how do you raise your voice, right, in communities of care when there's pushback on whether it is, you make everything too political, or why is everything about this, or why is everything about that? Whenever you find yourself, rant, like a rant when people are experiencing housing insecurity, or they're hungry, or even just living in fear. And it's not just, I don't use just lightly, right? So I really feel like some of that language things that you were just talking about might be able to help answer that question.
I agree. I definitely think that it is language that is helpful. How we approach these issues and how we change it, continuing to steer folks back to not the cause of the issue, or the fear that's tagged on to the issue, or even the political aspect that's tagged on to the issue, but to bring them back. Because again, we got to remember, this is the church. This is the great piece about the church being at the center and at the foundation of this justice work, because the church can then engage the divine. And so it's no longer, like I mentioned, a gripe session or a complaint session, or, well, we can't do this, or every time we tried it, they don't listen to us. But we're able to couple that with, God is going to give us strength to get this, to make this. God is going to prepare the way. And so that is what we have done. I mean, in historically in the Black church, it was clearly, people who were in the midst of the civil rights moment, I'm sure, had these same thoughts and the same pushback to say, how are we going to get out of this space? But it was our faith. It was our faith that allows us to continue to say, I'm looking that again. I believe that because God is for us and because Jesus, and this is something that Jesus is in the midst of, that I will see change that will happen. And in addition to that, we think about, how we can look at other cities and other localities, begin to bring some of the other areas and do research to see what other spaces and other localities that have done this similar work, and it has worked. I think all the time when I'm engaged in this work about Trinity UCC in Chicago and how they receive this pushback, receive a lot of this pushback, I guess is the best word. I'll stick with that. In trying to get a lot of their community organizing work done with the library that they were able to get built and created and implemented, and all the other things, that the housing project that they're working on. When you look at it from at the ground level, it always looks grim. But when you see what other churches have done, when you see what other institutions have done and organizations have done, it gives you hope. It gives you hope. And so, again, language, looking at other models that can be a resource, and pointing people back to God, pointing people back to the one, to the hope that we have, to the divine, that lets us know that when we do the work, that God is for us and God is with us. And again, we may not see this thing happen in our lifetime, but many of our ancestors, my ancestors, did the work not because they knew they would see it, but they knew that I would see it, right? They knew that I would be able to experience these things. And so I have to carry that same torch as I continue to do the work. And so I hope that is helpful.
Yes, amen, Patrice. Tom is pulling on kind of your bio, if you will, some of your current work. And it reminded me of an interview with Vivek Murphy, who is our Surgeon General. And there was an interview that Krista Tippett did last year where he was quoted saying, perhaps it's time to ask ourselves what's led us here, basically, what has led us to the place of being so evolved, to be so connected in so many ways, and yet so disconnected. And so, Tom asks, how can we leverage technology to build a sense of community rather than driving us apart or towards our comfortable individualism?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tom. I think so. I'll start here. One of the things that we were able to do, and I'm going back to my Virginia organizing work, maybe not so much with church engagement, but we did some work on disability rights with regard to transportation, paratransit issues. And one of the things that did was it really helped to even open the door for a more diverse issues. And when we did this, we knew that clearly a lot of the people with disabilities were not able to be present when we were talking about protesting, when we're talking about rallying, when we're talking about showing up at these different places. And so we were able then to tap into technology. And so technology has been the way, especially when we talk about people who have disabilities, technology has been that key for us to be able to hold these visits, to be able to do a lot of things that we would normally have done in person, we can still be able to do in a virtual setting and in an online setting. It also, let's just think about the World Wide Web gives us access to everything, right? It gives us access to all of the resources and all of the tools that we need that can help us to do the work that we're doing and tailor it to our very own context. This webinar that we're having right now is a part of technology. It gives us the ability to bring people from all across the world, from various spaces, right? We've had a 5-part webinar, but we've all been from all parts of the US, but we've been able to come together to share this work that we're doing from our context and from our culture and from our experiences. And so I believe it gives us access to resources that without it, we would not have, otherwise had access to. And so I hope that, especially like I say, with a lot of the work that we are engaged in with disability rights and with people with disabilities, certainly this platform helps us to keep everybody's voice loud and firm and affirmed when we're doing this work.
Yes, yes, amen, amen. Well, Patrice, before I take us out, I have goosebumps, right? There's just so much energy and love and honoring and respect in your voice, in the work that you do. And I am grateful for you. I am grateful for the relationships that you build. I'm grateful for the way that you invite the young folks in. It is all really, really amazing. And so, beloveds, I want to thank you for joining us for this 5-part series of Building Up a New World, which highlighted the work of the 5 participants in the Congregational and Community Engagement Fellowship Program. And next week, we look forward to being with you all again, as we'll be joined, and the webinar will be hosted by Reverend Dr. Sarah Lund, who will help us better understand how each of us find ourselves in the world right now. The Mental Health Network WISE program, which stands for Welcoming, Inclusive, Supportive, and Engaged, provides a path for congregations, associations, conferences, and nonprofit organizations to join in building communities of care to reduce stigma and to promote the mental well-being. So come join us next week and learn how to become a wise congregation and hear the stories of those who have taken this journey. And so, Patrice, thank you again. And I would love if you're willing to take us out in our benediction.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Let us close. Oh, gracious God, we thank you. We thank you for this time together, this time of learning, and this time of growing. As we go forth from this place, continue to lead us on the path of justice, Jesus' justice, that we may embody the act of solidarity and unity, and that we may create communities of care in the church and beyond. Amen.
Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.